true sense of purpose doesn't come from what we can do to get. It comes from what we can do for others. I'm an idealist. I want to live in a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired to go to work, feel safe when they're there, and come home fulfilled at the end of the day. I had a good career in advertising, and I completely lost my passion for what I was doing. It made me feel like my job was stupid.
From Martin Luther King to Apple computers, it doesn't matter. Those are the capacity to inspire. Every single one of them, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, thinks, acts, and communicates from the inside out. They all start with why.
When you have the why, it gives you this calm confidence that when people are yelling and screaming at you what you should do, you go, I'm good, I'm on my path. And so you've never seen a TM when you see the golden circle or why. And the reason is because I want others to take it. I want others to build on it. All of those techniques used to build a company in the 80s and 90s, they're not working anymore. What happens? Innovation suffers, engagement suffers, productivity suffers, trust suffers. So okay, you bastard CEO who thinks all the stuff that I talk about is craziness, and you don't have time to make these changes. We don't have time. It's a war out there. I know guys who go to war, and I'll tell you, it's not a war. You tinker with money.
Start with why. What is your why? This is a concept I heard about years ago, and I watched this man talk about the why of a business before the what and the how. And I was fascinated, and I've been thinking about the why of London Real for years, and I've always thought about the whys of certain businesses. And the why really tells you so much about what they're about, and ultimately we buy things and buy into things because of the why, and much less because of the what. And that is the message of Mr. Simon Sinek, author, TED speaker, just all around pretty fascinating guy. And we had really one of our most epic conversations ever on London Real, and it was a true honor to finally get to spend time with Simon. And he told us about his journey, and much like me, he lives his journeys. His books are about his life, and the reason that he started with why is because he had a successful advertising agency in New York with blue chip clients, doing great business, making great money, and yet he was unhappy. He was horribly depressed, and he wanted to find out why. And so he started with his own why. And he gave this talk for years before he was ever a TED speaker, and talked about what is your why. And this morphed into a book, and this continued his journey into where he went to Afghanistan. And when he saw what was happening there with the military and the armed forces, he was inspired to write the book Leaders Eat Last, which is all about leadership and how we need to embrace this new technique in our modern times, or we're really going to have a lot of trouble down the line. Simon spoke so frankly with me about his own journeys, about technology and how it's affecting our children and millennials, and also how he's such a great public speaker. And we went really deep here, and I'm just so happy that we were able to produce this amazing conversation with an incredible man who up to now you would have really only seen on the stage. And so I was so just honored and grateful to get this intimate conversation with Simon. And please spend the time and watch the entire piece, because it will really change your life and hopefully ask you, what is your why? Why are you really doing it? And let people know that, and then they'll really buy into everything you do. And it's gotten me to think, what is our why here at London Real? Well, our what is definitely more than just videos with great people and great conversations. Our why is because I want more from this world. I want more from you and me, and I want more from myself. I want the best. I want the best version of me on this limited time I'm here on earth. And that's what London Real is all about, and that's what our academy is about, and the 1,000 members that are around the world that get together and push each other to be the best versions of themselves, to hang out with the best people, and to stop playing small. There's not a lot of time. And it's time to go big and time to take some risk. And you know, that's really what we're all about. And here's a little bit more about that.
The entrepreneurial journey, it can be a lonely road. I push myself in so many areas, but you know, you can't do it all yourself.
The thing about the Academy is, it's like, look, you have the ideas, you have the ability, you have the skill, and you have the sort of ambition for yourself. But when you have a group of people pulling you forward, it's so important.
Accountability is what's missing from most of the programs or any gurus or any internet mentor that I had before.
I wanted to get some accountability. I wanted to make myself accountable to a group, to you.
The reason we started the Academy is because I felt like we were doing these amazing talks, like we'd have a Peter Sage episode or a Dan Pena episode or a Kala or someone, and you get super inspired, and then YouTube stops, and then you go back to your life and you don't make any changes. And it was just like, what? It felt like, what are we doing? If you're designing your life right, the good times are now. And in a few years, you'll look back and say, wow, that was amazing.
The thing about the Academy is it has so many different sort of layers to it. I think your web seminars are awesome. The way you broke it down and the style of your teaching is pretty awesome.
I like the feed. When I have to motivate myself, I kind of look at others struggling and getting over those struggles. So I actually follow daily the feed.
Best feature would be the sort of Facebook aspect of it, the social media aspect of it, as in creating a profile with your goals, your dreams.
Everyone's on the same vibe, and we may be at different stages in our journeys, but everyone's on the same page at the end of the day. Everyone's really trying to push themselves and building the best you. It really resonates with me.
And the fact that I'm committing a small amount of money and the fact that I'm actually trying to interact with those people means that I'm invested and means that I will keep it for the long run.
You have to be serious about yourself and what you want to achieve. And if you're serious about yourself, this is going to be such a fantastic platform.
London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Simon Sinek, the TED speaker, ethnographer, and author, best known for popularizing the concept Start With Why, which became the second most watched TED Talk of all time. You are the author of 2 books, Start With Why, How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action, and your newest book, the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Leaders Eat Last, Why Some Teams Pull Together and Others Don't. You speak around the globe, teach leaders and organizations how to inspire people, and comment for the New York Times, Business Week, and Inc. magazine. Simon, welcome to London Real.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and welcome home to the UK. You spent time here. You went to South Africa. I think you came back, and now you live in the States. What's it like to be back, and what's it like to have lived in so many different places?
Well, it's always nice to be back. I mean, I have family here, and I don't feel like a tourist when I come here, even though I may do touristy things. There is a sense of familiarity which I always enjoy, like going to a childhood home, you know. So that's great. And growing up all over the world, you know, it's very funny. People ask me the question, you know, doesn't it bother you don't really have roots anywhere? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't have anything to compare it to. You know, that was my upbringing. and it was pretty great. Lived on 4 continents by the age of 10. It's definitely added to who I am and how I see the world, for sure. But yeah, I had a great upbringing, no complaints.
And when you were getting your education here, at one point you almost went to be a barrister and went into law.
That's true.
And then didn't.
That's true.
Do you ever think about that inflection point in your life?
No. I graduated college in the States and then came back here, and with the idea that I would become a barrister and live the rest of my life in the UK. And half a law degree in, I realized I didn't want to be a barrister, didn't want to be a lawyer, and decided to leave law school, and coincidentally was dating a girl who happened to be studying advertising. She was an American exchange student, and she's like, "You should look at advertising." And I went, "Sounds good," and then sort of set myself on this path of going into advertising and decided to do it back in the States. I went back into the States and went into advertising, and the rest is history, you know?
That's
so
crazy.
It's funny how the world works.
I would have thought you had had some, urge or some fascination with advertising or marketing your whole life.
No.
No.
I mean, I like the idea of what I used to describe it many years ago as the big sell. I like the idea of putting together an argument that would, the words I used back then were, convince somebody that they should choose this over that. And for me, the big sell was as true in a courtroom, which is why I wanted to be a barrister, not a solicitor, as it was in advertising. I had to put together an argument to convince someone that someone was guilty or not guilty. I had to put together an argument to convince somebody that this is better than that, So to me, it was exactly the same thing.
And there's a public speaking component in the barrister world as well, because you're presenting arguments.
Right.
Were you good at that when you were trained to be a barrister?
I didn't know.
Okay.
I didn't know. It wasn't something that I grew up doing. I've always been a behind-the-scenes person. I like being behind the scenes. Like whenever I did like theater stuff in school, I was never on the stage. I was always behind the scenes. In fact, I resisted the front. And even now, I don't consider myself a front of the stage person, and don't really crave it, quite frankly. It has become part of my life, and it's part of the way I spread my message. But I'm still a behind the scenes person. In fact, the work that I do now, even now, that I'm proudest of, is the stuff that people don't know anything about and don't know that I do, and is not on any website, and I don't talk about it, and it just happens, And it's all the behind the scenes work that I'm generally my happiest.
Because people know you for the big TED Talks, the big books, but you do a lot of work with corporations, charities. There's a lot of different things.
Government, politics, military,
right?
And it's all behind the scenes.
Take me back to 2009. Puget Sound, bad microphones, flip chart, a 3-letter organization that at this point probably not that many people had heard of. The people in the know had, but it wasn't a global phenomenon. You get up to talk, for 18 minutes. Did you know how big of a platform that could potentially be? Did you? What was happening?
So
right
TED was already starting to become a thing, and it was still a thing of prestige. And so when I got the invitation to do it, I was very honored. It still had prestige, and I'm under no illusions that I'm very lucky as to the timing, because as you said, TEDx was a very new thing, and there weren't that many TEDx events, and there weren't that many TEDx talks. If I had done my talk today, with 25,000 talks and 1,500 events a year or whatever, something ridiculous, there's no way that my talk would have gained the popularity that it did. There's just no way. It just would have been buried in the masses.
You think so?
Oh, 100%.
Really? Okay.
So I got very lucky with that. And so it was an honor to show up. And I gave a talk to a room of 50 people, 60 people, something like that. It was pretty small. And yeah, I mean, the microphone, I was the first speaker of the day. And so the microphone broke in the middle of the talk, so I'm changing mics.
But you were smooth on that change.
I mean, what am I going to do? It goes along and somebody hands you a new mic, you take it.
Right.
I'd been speaking on that message already for a few years. I'd already been giving the start with my message for 3 years before there was any TED Talk, any book. But it was always long form. It was always an hour and a half. And so I'd already had practice being on a stage. Never done it in 18 minutes. That was the part that I was nervous about, not the actual talk. And I guess practice I knew what to do when the microphone broke.
Can you talk about the genesis of that idea? Because you went into the marketing space and the advertising space, but then you got a bit disillusioned. But you were cognizant enough to recognize in yourself that there was something missing in your why. I was wondering if you could talk about that part of your life.
Yeah, my story is kind of not that different to a lot of people, to be honest. I had a good career in advertising and was working on new business pitches and stuff for the company I work for. And I lived through September 11th in New York. And, you know, September 11th affected many people in different ways. And one of the things it did to me was it made me feel like my job was stupid. You know, like, I remember trying to come, and my office was really close to Ground Zero. And I remember coming back to work when we were allowed to, because the area was closed for a few weeks. I remember going back to the office just thinking, what value am I providing here? Like this industry and my job are ridiculously stupid, you know? And so I already had an eye on sort of doing something else, and I had an entrepreneurial spirit. And I considered myself more of a marketer than an advertiser anyway. And so I quit and started my own business with a partner, and went to do something that I thought was in my vision, you know, not theirs. And it went really well for 3 years. I mean, when I say well, meaning we survived. It's never like that, you know. It was more like that, but we did okay. You know, there's over 90% of all small businesses fail in the first 3 years, and we made it.
You didn't, right?
And we didn't. So I mean, like that. We joined a very elite club, you know. But year 4 was very different for me. I had already bought out my partner, and I completely lost my passion for what I was doing, and I didn't know why. And people say stupid things to you, like follow your passion. You're like, I'm doing the same thing, and I don't love it anymore. Like, do what you love. You're like, same thing, you know. So I was confused as to what it was. Plus I was embarrassed because superficially my life was pretty good. I made a decent living. We had amazing clients. Like, we had blue chip clients that we had no business having at our little company. We did great work, well respected by our clients, and yet I didn't feel it. And so I was very embarrassed by the fact that it's like, you know, I'm unhappy, you know, it's like everything looks just fine, you know? So I didn't talk about it. And I would say that all of my energy, instead of going into building my business, all of my energy went into pretending that I was happier, more successful, and more in control than I actually felt, which is a pretty dark space.
Yeah. But you're the leader of that organization, so you have to put that.
And so you
face.
put on this air that you got everything under control, and your family asks you how you are, and everything's under control. And you know, I would go to business conferences to learn how to like build my business, and that actually made me feel worse because I'd have all these people standing on the stage telling us how we should build our businesses, and all I could hear was everything I was doing wrong, as opposed to what I should be doing. And so it actually made me feel even more depressed. And it wasn't until a good friend came to me, concerned about me. She saw that there was something different, and she was worried for me. And I remember the conversation. She was very nervous, sort of coming to me, but like, you know, trying to approach, basically challenging you, like your life is not as you claim it is. And it really allowed me to admit that I was unhappy. And that gave me the courage to find a solution. The fact that I had a friend in my corner who was there that I could cry to and say, I don't know if I can do this, gave me courage to find a solution. And I was very lucky. There was a confluence of events that happened around the same time. Long story short, I was able to discover that this natural occurring pattern, based on the biology of human decision-making, that every single organization on the planet exists on the same 3 levels: what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. Everybody knows what they do. I knew what I did. Some people know how they do it. I could tell you what made me different or special or stand out from my competitors, but I couldn't tell you why. And so I realized, until I was able to articulate that piece, that my life was out of balance. Everything was out of balance. So I was obsessed with this thing called the why. Figured out how to find my why, restored my passion to levels I'd never experienced before, unbelievable. Did what anybody would do or does when you find something beautiful. You share it with the people you love, and that's what I did. So I shared it with my friends, and my friends started making crazy life changes. And they would invite me to their homes to share it with the people they loved. And I would literally, it all started, I would stand in someone's living room in New York City, and people would sit on the floor, and I would give this talk about the why. That's how it all began. And people just kept inviting me to do it, and I would help people find their why for $100 on the side. You know, that's how it started. So there was never a time where I said, this will be my career. this I can make my millions with this thing. This thing has commercial, value. It was never that. It was always something to share for free, or at least it wasn't a commercial or academic exercise. It was always something just to be shared because it had value, and that was it. And so that's how I went on. And it's really funny. My why is to inspire people to do what inspires them. And I remember exactly where I was sitting too. I had one of the biggest decisions I had to make in my life, which was the first test of my why after I had discovered it, which is I've got this magical thing that clearly has value. Do I copyright it, rights protect it, keep it for myself, put a little TM every time you see it anywhere in the world, and literally sell everything and own it all? Or do I look for opportunities to just share it and give it away whenever possible? And if my why is to inspire people to do what inspires them, there was no choice. I only had one option. And so you've never seen a TM when you see the golden circle or why. And the reason is because I want others to take it. I want others to build on it. I want the idea to spread. It's not mine. I simply put the concept into words. It belongs to whoever wants to use it. And the reason it has spread is because that was a strategic decision many years ago that it should spread.
You had probably people saying you better copyright it.
Yeah, I had all that.
And you were like,
"You're
no.
crazy." Yeah, I had all
Right.
that. Mm-hmm. I had all
And
that.
it's probably been shared more by the fact that you weren't trying to control it.
Yeah, and I'm proud of that. I tend to think that my life is the tip of an iceberg, meaning no matter what I've been able to accomplish or do, there's so much more to do still. I'm an idealist. I have a vision of a profoundly different world than the world that exists now. I want to live in a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired to go to work, feel safe when they're there, and come home fulfilled at the end of the day. That is not the world we live in now. That is the world I want to live in, and that is the world I want my friends and family to live in. And so all of my work is committed to building that world. Well, I know I'm one piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and it's going to take a lot of us who are all working on different things. My job may be to preach. Like, when you do a jigsaw puzzle, you put the box against the wall and then you do the jigsaw puzzle. Well, my job is to point at the box and remind people what we're building. That's my piece of the puzzle. I'm a preacher, right? And others play another role. Your job is to help disseminate the messages. Somebody else's job is to build the company based on those messages. Somebody else's job is to demand that their leaders provide that thing. So we all have a role to play, and we all put our pieces down until we have the picture formed. So no matter what I've accomplished, we're nowhere near that picture. So I always think of myself, like I said, that my work is tip of the iceberg. I still have much to do. But the one thing I'm really proud of is that the concept of why is now in the vernacular. When I started this, no one ever referred to their why. And nobody ever said that company needs to know their why or doesn't know their why. And people who have no idea who I am, and journalists who are writing who've never read my work or seen me speak, are now using that vernacular. That to me is, I'm proud of that, because what it proves is that the message resonates, is that people have taken it and made it their own and use it as the currency, as the vocabulary of what they're trying to communicate, which previously was unclear.
And so most of us are out there doing things that we probably shouldn't be doing and that we don't really enjoy doing.
Right.
And so there's massive inefficiencies in the
Sure.
world. And that if we can get these people aligned to find out
Sure.
what they want to do and then believing it with all their passion, then everything just can go up 10x, 100x, 1000x.
Mm-hmm. And here's the folly: it's good for business. That's the joke. That's the joke, which is people who know their why, people who are working for companies that align with their why, people who feel like they belong, people who feel trusted and trusting, people who feel that their work is valued and valuable, work harder, are more productive, are more innovative, they are much better employees. And the joke is, when we offer our people that, those companies invariably outperform their competition over the long term, almost always. Costco significantly outperforms GE over the long term. The Hale General Electric has half the stock value of Costco over the long term. GE stock value looks like this if you go from when Jack Welch came into power, right? Back in the early 80s. Literally, it's a roller coaster. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. It's an absolute roller coaster when you look at it. But they were hailed because of the steep spikes. And you look at Costco, that for years the analyst community criticized because their stock price was flat, and that they spend too much time and too much money investing, these are the analysts' words, investing in their employees and their customers and ignoring their shareholders. And if you look at it on an annualized or quarterly basis, the stock price certainly looks flat. But if you pull back over 30 years, this is what GE looks like, and this is what Costco looks like. GE needed a $300 billion bailout in 2008. That's not a stable company. That's not a good company. That's not a company that's built to last. That's a company built for short-term gain at the expense of human beings, right? Costco, where they prioritize people, was the steady, beautiful upslope and unbelievably stable. And when bad things happen in the economy, little bumps, okay? So if you invested $1 in GE the year that Costco went public, which is about December 1984, so Jack Welch had been in office about 3 or 4 years, you would have made 600% on your money in GE today. If you invested $1 in the S&P, you would have made 600% on your money. And if you invested $1 in Costco, you would have made 1,200% on your money. 2x GE, 2x, in a much more stable fashion. That's called investing. That's called stability. That's called a well-led company. That's called a company built to last, right? And invariably, those companies always prioritize their people.
And what do you see from the outside when you see Costco? Can you see it in a minute when you look at the language they use or culture, employees? Is it very stark difference?
Sure. Visit there. If you work there, you feel trusted and you trust the people you work with. You don't walk around with the sense of, you come from banking, you know, nobody trusts each other. You walk around waiting for somebody to stab you in the back.
Yeah. Even Jack Welch complained about the finance arm, when he bought GE, because he said they were even worse than everyone else. They just wanted to get paid.
But the joke was he was the one who pioneered shareholder supremacy. He was one of the ones who pioneered rank and yank. He was one of the ones who pioneered using layoffs to balance the books. So he built the culture he got. So he can not complain. That's exactly what he built, right? A company built for the short term.
It's kind of an
Congratulations.
of the management techniques before him, right? I come in, I do this, we charge this.
Right.
Yeah.
And the problem is, CEOs used to be compensated based on how well the company performed. Now they're compensated based on how well the equity performs. That's screwed up, right? So of course you had to invest in your employees and your customers because that's how the company performs. Now, if you announce layoffs, the stock price goes up. Figure that one out. So the fact of the matter is, the theories that were proposed and pioneered and popularized in the 80s and 90s were done for a different time. They were done for short-term gains in years of prosperity with relative peace and a kinder, gentler Cold War. It was a good time. It was an easy time, let's be honest. And so we probably could afford to be selfish. I mean, that's how we acted. We dismantled Glass-Steagall and things like that, Well, those times are gone. These are not relatively stable times. The competitive landscape is very different. The economy is very different. And all of those techniques used to build a company in the 80s and 90s, they're not working anymore. And companies are struggling more than they used to, but they're still applying the same old techniques. And so it gets harder and harder, and the stresses go up, and working in these companies is more and more difficult, just from a stress standpoint or stability standpoint. So what happens? Innovation suffers, engagement suffers, productivity suffers, trust suffers, cooperation suffers. A few years ago, The Economist ran one of their multi-page, specials in the middle of the magazine, and it was all about the decline of innovation in the world. And they spent a whole bunch of pages making the case that innovation is on decline. Things like fewer patents have been filed, and the ones that are being filed are of smaller value, And they made their case that innovation is in decline globally, and then they attempted to explain why, and they made all kinds of guesses, things like the internet, things like globalization, things like the speed of business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not one single word, not one, talked about people, not one. So my question is, who's coming up with all of these ideas? If you want to know why there's decline in global innovation, it's because why should I take a risk Because innovation requires experimentation, and experimentation requires failure. It's in the definition. So if there's a decline in innovation, why, A, should I give you my great ideas if there's a risk associated with them in an environment where fear is the norm, or at least lack of trust? And if I don't have ideas, I don't have anything to inspire me to come up with ideas, because I'm spending so much time focusing on the short term that I actually don't have time to figure out how to advance a cause or big ideas. It's just not, it doesn't even factor into my daily thinking. I'm too busy trying to, build my book of business or whatever I'm trying to do. So
we're not fostering that innovation in these corporate
we don't foster an
environments.
environment.
Right.
Of
Right.
innovation.
Startups are different because they can do it themselves and get
Yeah.
paid themselves, but otherwise we're not.
Or
fostering
but they start out with an idea. They started out with an idea.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. The reason for their existence is the idea.
Yeah, I was at a company recently, and I heard, I think it was the CFO, and he stood up and said, our number one priorities are innovation and efficiency. And I was like, good luck with that, because ain't nothing efficient about innovation. It is wasteful. You have to throw so much money into R&D. You have to try things. You have to fail. You have to try again. That's just how it works. Nothing. You think the Wright brothers built one plane and it flew? Do you have any idea how many crashes they had before that plane finally took off? It's not in the design. It's in the trials. That's not efficient at all. It's often slow and it's sometimes costly. But if you're not willing to pay for it, then you can't be innovative. The trials and error and sometimes product failures that you have to go through. So you can pick one. Sometimes they align. Sometimes it can be efficient. But you can't demand that both those metrics grow simultaneously. And so I get a kick out of this. I get a kick out of the fact that very, very smart people who are leading or running, I'm not sure they're leading. You can't lead a company. You can only lead people. But you can run a company. So very, very smart people who run very, very big companies, and they've got all sorts of degrees and, credibility, that they don't see that efficiencies and innovations they're not compatible. It's oil and water, Sometimes they can be mixed if you shake them up, I guess.
I want to get into
I get a kick out of that. Anyway.
Yeah, I know. I can tell you're very passionate about it, which is fantastic. I want to get into your second book in just a second, Leaders Eat Last. And you made a few allusions to that at your first TED Talk. At the very end, you were talking about Martin Luther King and how people arrived not for him, but for themselves. Yeah. And there was some seeds in there of that next book.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about that. But what happened to you after that TED Talk? Was it a big pop, or was it just kind of a awareness of your idea that had been happening, or did that change things for you and your future?
So I was very lucky to get a book deal about the same time, or slightly before the TED Talk. So they actually came out at exactly the same time. They both came out at the end of the year of 2009, right? And the TED Talk started to gain popularity on YouTube, which is what made the TED people take notice. And at one point, I think it was the highest ranked TEDx talk on YouTube. I think it reached that point. And so they put it on TED.com in May of 2010. I didn't know that they were going to do that. That I found out when it happened,
Right, because at that time, TEDx talks didn't go to TED.com probably. TEDx was very new.
It was very new, and it was very rare. And the quality, as you pointed out, the microphone broke.
Right,
It was not the best.
Which is funny, though. I remembered your TED Talk from years ago as a TED Talk. And it's funny, as I looked into it more, I was like, oh, it's a bad mic and bad this. But
it's TEDx.
Funny enough, when I first saw it, it was the message that hit me.
Yeah. So they saw it, they decided they were going to put it on TED.com, which gave it much broader exposure, obviously. And then the numbers started to grow. Ironically, as the views went up, book sales didn't. It was really sort of very funny. The book did its own thing and the TED Talk did its own thing. And they weren't related. But I think what started to happen was the demand started to grow for me to come and share my ideas, to come and speak. And that allowed me to to make a living spreading the idea that I wanted to spread. So I didn't have to do consulting or anything anymore on the side.
And did you welcome that transition?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
And you closed down your advertising agency in the meantime, or?
I just sort of drifted away from it.
Okay. And so this was a welcome change.
What an amazing opportunity to be able to share an idea that I'm passionate about, that others are passionate about, that inspires other people and hopefully inspires change. I mean, what a great honor to be given that bully pulpit. And so, yeah, the TED Talk definitely created a demand for me to come and share those messages. And I'm immensely grateful for to the TED folks for that opportunity.
When you look back on that talk now, has anything changed about your concept of the golden circle and why, how, what? Or do you ever go back and think, okay, I would change this, or has anything evolved? There's not many people that disagree with what you say, but I've heard people say that they would throw in a who in the center of your golden circle. Yeah. And I'm just curious if your views have changed and what you feel about that who piece.
Sure. So I've heard that before. People say to me, you forgot a piece. You forgot who. I didn't. Who is the sum total of all three of those pieces? Only when all three of those pieces are aligned will we know, quote unquote, who you are. Right? Because if you're doing things that are misaligned with your cause, your purpose, your why, then we'll say to you, it's like I don't know who you are anymore. Right? If you are a person who's driven by X and you start doing Y, people will not know who you are and you cease to be trustworthy, reliable, or predictable. Right? Remember, this is the biology of the brain. Those three levels correspond with the evolution of the human brain. So I can't just arbitrarily add or take away pieces. It is what it is. But who you are, or who a company is the sum total of all three of those pieces. So when all three of those pieces are in play and aligned, the who is clear. When they are not, the who is unclear. So it's built in. It's there. It's built in. But to answer your question, there are definitely nuances that I would like to have said differently, that I would have added or taken away. And I think every author feels the same way. Your book is never, the minute it comes out, you're like,
right.
It's that you just accept that. That just goes with the territory. But no, I'm still a devotee to the purity of the original idea, and it serves me in how I live my life and sort of manage the business as well. And what's also funny as an aside is we don't actually talk about the business. I talk about running the business, but we don't actually run a business. We've never had a discussion inside our company as to what's good for the business or what's bad for the business. Should we do this for the business? The only discussions we ever have is this right for the movement? Should we do this for the movement? Will this help the movement? That's how we make decisions. So the why goes front and center of how we make decisions for the company, because we think of ourselves as being responsible for the growth of a movement, not necessarily the growth of a company.
One of the big things in that talk was the law of diffusion of innovation. Yeah. I hadn't really heard it articulated like that. And again, this is 7 years ago now. Yeah. How has that morphed over time? Is that something you still talk a lot about? Mm-hmm. And what was the reaction to that part of that talk?
So it's not my idea. It's a guy by the name of Emmett Rogers who wrote that down in the 1960s. And what I did with it was reapplied it. It was used, Geoffrey Moore talked about it as it relates to the growth of technology. But I looked at it in terms of just the growth of or spread of any idea. I just took it as a social phenomenon, so I sort of reapplied it. But to me, the law of diffusion is a religion for me. The idea is not to worry about the majority if you want to have an impact in the majority. If you want to have mass market success, mass market stability, or mass market acceptance of an idea, you don't actually aim at the majority, you aim at the early adopters. And when you reach 15 to 18% market penetration, it just tips. It is the tipping point, social phenomenon. Mm. The reason being because the early majority will not try something until somebody else tries it first. And so when I say it's become religion for me, I mean it. So we're very good at figuring out and discerning who's an early adopter and who's majority. So for example, when somebody says to me, convince me why I should bring you in to talk to our company. Convince me why we should use any of your ideas inside our organization. My answer is don't. Because you just identified yourself, when you say convince me, you just identified yourself as being a part of the majority. And it's not that I think that you're a bad person, I just think that you're coming at a different time and your time is later.
Right.
You'll come along later. So I'm looking for the people who go, this is good. I mean, it's not perfect, and it's got, I'm not 100% sure how it works, but it's probably worth it there. There's probably something there that we should pay attention to. Would you like to come and work with us? Those are the people I want to work with. And so we're very, very good at saying no thanks to the people who demand us to convince them. And we're very gracious and grateful to those who invite us in to come and help. And that doesn't mean we only preach to the converted. We work with some pretty dysfunctional companies, but what we know is the leadership cares about trying to do the right thing, and that's very appealing.
Is that good advice for any innovator, to just not to pitch those people that are on that front part of the curve, that are ready to adopt, and save the rest of them for when they're in the cycle later?
Yeah, I mean, it's a much more stable way of getting an idea to spread. The problem is you can't predict as to when it'll tip over. That's the problem. People want certainty that my 3-year plan is that by this date it will. I mean, if you have enough money, you can buy popularity, but the minute you stop spending it, it goes away, you know? Like we know if you invest a huge amount of money in advertising, you'll see sales go up. And if you stop advertising, I'm talking any advertising, bad advertising, and when you stop spending, the sales will go down. Well, you paid for that. Now, how would you do it without spending the money? You know, how will you do it so that when you stop doing anything? Remember, I don't have a publicist. I never had one through any of the book, neither of the books have ever been reviewed by any major press. They haven't, right? Okay. The reason the TED Talk spread, the reason the books spread, is because somebody else told somebody about it. That's by design, right? Because for 10 years, we've been obsessed with the early adopters. Okay. And so if the work has spread at all, it's because we always put all of our energy and all of our efforts and I would much rather get paid nothing to work with an early adopter than get paid a ton of money to go work with somebody in the majority. Okay. Because I'm not in it for the return, I'm in it for the impact. And so you've got to align your strategy accordingly. And so I love early adopters. And but like I said, when somebody says, how long is this going to take? The answer is, I don't know. It's just like exercise. Consistency is more important than intensity. You can't go to the gym for 9 hours and be in shape. It doesn't work that way. But if you go to the gym every single day for 20 minutes, you will get into shape. The problem is, I don't know when. I know it will take more than a week. I know that. I also know that if you're going every day and you see no results in 6 months or a year, you're probably doing something wrong. I know that. The problem is, I don't know when. I just know it works. I just know it. It's like a relationship. When someone falls in love with you, you know, it's not the big events, remembering their birthday and buying them flowers on Valentine's Day, that they fall in love with you. It's the consistency, it's the little things. It's saying good morning to them before you check your phone. It's getting them a drink from the fridge when you get yourself a drink from the fridge. It's acknowledging them when they talk to you. It's turning off the TV and turning your body towards them when they want to have a discussion. It's little things that you do on a consistent basis, that doing any of those things once or twice does nothing, that eventually, I don't know when, they'll fall in love with you. And you will fall in love with them. That's just how it works. But I don't know the timing. And so the law of diffusion works the same way. It absolutely works. It absolutely works. The exact timing of when it tips is unpredictable. And if you're okay with that, it's golden.
And if you know your why.
And if you know your why, it gives you the confidence to stick with it. So knowing your why is the equivalent, metaphorically, of knowing that exercise works. You don't have to be a scientist or a doctor to know that it works. Right? We have a sense that it's the right thing to do. Right? And I know that if I stick with it, it will work. I just have that internal confidence. Right? Even though I don't see it and I don't feel it. Even though there's, I can't see any difference from a day-to-day basis on my body. Right? It's the same thing. When you have the why, it gives you this calm confidence that when people are yelling and screaming at you what you should do, you go, I'm good. I'm on my path. It might not be working. And I remember, in the early days of this, when I was starting to understand the power of the why, and I was really starting to understand this thing called the law of diffusion and realize this had to become a religion for me. I had to be obsessed with this because this was the way ideas would spread. I remember going for dinners with friends of mine who were much more successful entrepreneurs, who were making much more money than me, whose businesses were much better structured than mine. And they would tell me in sort of stern to borderline insulting ways that I was an idiot, and look at them as the case study, and how much money they were making, and how well they were doing, and how badly I was running my business. And sometimes it was unnerving because sometimes, like, I was bootstrapping this thing. I mean, I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, but I still believed that the path that I was on was the right way to do it for me. Not saying for everybody, for me. And it worked.
And would you articulate that to them at the time?
I couldn't.
You couldn't, right?
I wasn't able to.
Right.
I wasn't able to.
It's interesting because so many guests that I've had on here are doing what you're doing, as in they're working on that diffusion, but they don't necessarily know the theory that you do.
Right.
So they're doing a lot of the things you're doing without knowing why they're doing them.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a great thing, and it's why these entrepreneurs have success. But the question is, how does it last? And very often what happens with these companies is as soon as they die or quit or retire, the company putters along for a little bit and then invariably nosedives, or it goes out of business, or it gets bought or merged, or whatever it is. So until you can articulate the theories, then how are others supposed to know what's in your gut? I think this is the value of putting these things into words. Do I have to put my why into words? No. But what it allows is for those on my team to make my cause their own, because we all believe in the same thing, simply because I put it into words. It allows those we work with to share in our cause, and it allows us to build the army. And I don't have to be the person at all. In fact, I don't need to be the person. You know, this thing will only work because my vision, the one that I articulated at the beginning of the show, probably won't come to life in my lifetime. I probably will never see it happen.
That long?
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
It might take. I might get there, but what I expect to see is momentum. I expect to see that the needle is moving. I expect to see progress towards that. I expect to see more and more companies adopting these theories and experimenting with them and inventing things that I couldn't even conceptualize myself. I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, and I think it is moving. I think we can see that.
Well, look, it's embarrassing that I have a career, right? Like, I talk about things like trust and cooperation. There should be no demand for my message. But the fact that there is means it's missing and people want it. So I'll take that as an opportunity.
Yeah. 5 years later, after that publication, you wrote Leaders Eat Last. Mm-hmm. Why that book? Why then? And is that something that had been brewing inside of you? Mm-hmm. Obviously, I felt like there were seeds of that in that talk in 2009, but I don't know the whole of it.
Yeah. So I never set out to be an author. I'm not a journalist, right? So I honestly believed that I was a one-trick pony. I used to joke that I was a one-trick pony. It was a good trick, but it was one trick, and that was the why. And people called me the why guy. And I never wanted to do one thing in my life, but I figured if I was going to do one thing, that was a good thing, you know? And never thought I'd write another book, ever. But the good news is that I'm on a journey. All of my work is semi-autobiographical, and it's my journey. Yeah. And so the first book was about my loss of my passion and how to regain my passion and have a sense of purpose in my life and in my work. That's what I wrote about. And then as my journey progressed, a new problem emerged, which is I had trouble trusting people. I had a couple of instances as my work started to get better known. I basically wrote a manual of how to talk to me. You know, that's what Start With Why is. And so I'd meet people. There's one specific person I'm thinking of where I met him at an event, and he sounded just like my kind of guy. He was an amazing guy. And he talked in idealistic terms and believed in my work, and we became friends. And from all superficial standards, it looked like a friendship. He'd call me on the weekends. When we were in the same city on business, we'd go out for dinner. He'd tell me about his failing marriage. I mean, that's what friends do, right? We confide in each other, right? And he said, I'd love to work with you. I said, sounds great. I like working with my friends. And so we started working on one of his clients, or he invited me to meet one of his clients. And he sent me a contract. Great. And I went through it and offered a couple changes to a couple terms, no big deal. And he got furious. How dare I? And I never heard from him ever.
To watch the rest of this fascinating interview, click on the link below and go to londonrealacademy.com. There you can sign in with your social media, log in and watch the rest of the episode for free, along with all of our episodes on London Real, my webinars, and all of our premium content, all located over at londonrealacademy.com. So click on the link below, you'll be directed there, and you can watch the rest of this fascinating interview, and I'll see you there.
But simultaneously, I was hanging out with folks in the military a lot. and I was doing a lot of work with the military. And I kept meeting people who would